Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Energize Your Online Business podcast. Hey there, Kate.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, guys, today we are going to talk about mistakes. In the spirit of being completely transparent, I'm not perfect. I know. You're all shocked, as I was shocked to discover as well. But obviously, I make little mistakes all the time. Which I could certainly list out too, but too long of an episode. But in this one, we're going to talk about some of the biggest business mistakes I've made, what I've learned from them, and what you guys can learn as well. So I guess we might as well just hop right in. Let's just talk about my mistakes. The first
going
one.
Back to dark places.
Going back to dark places. I know I'm going to need a little time after we record this to recoup. The first one has to do with hiring. Way back when I was first hiring for an operations manager, and thankfully since then we now have Caitlin on our team, who is an amazing operations manager. The way her brain works is just it is completely foreign to me, but it's brilliant. But I knew that I needed someone to handle systems and the processes in the business. I knew I wanted systems and processes, and the way my mind works, I'm not the best person to set them up. So I needed someone to come in and make sure that our business was running efficiently and effectively. And I think sometimes you will hear, you don't have to hire for the role, hire the person. When you get the right person, they can do just about any job. And I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true. The mistake that I made was that I was not specific enough in what I was looking for. I had not really carefully thought through exactly what I needed and what those traits I was looking for were. And I also had not devised tests along the way to make sure that the person that I hired was in this role. You know, I interviewed someone, just a really nice person. We got along great. You know, I said in the interview, I think I said, you know, we're looking for someone to implement. This is how sad my interviewing process used to be. We're looking for someone who can implement systems. Can you do that? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, great. Check that off the list. Oh, friends, that's a little bonus mini mistake there. But you know, we brought her on the team, and she said she could do systems, and she said she understood systems. But again, I wasn't specific. What does that mean? Can you create systems? Like, all right, I guess anybody could do that, but I wasn't specific enough. I was not specific enough about the traits that I was looking for in this person. Now I think we were talking with Caitlin. I think the three of us were together, and we were talking with Caitlin about the way our cabinets in the kitchen are arranged. And my cabinets, I think the spice cabinets specifically, like I just pull the spices out when I use them, and I throw them back in there, and they don't fit, then I just kind of push them in there. But it works kind of ish. But Caitlin's like, oh no, my spice cabinet is alphabetized. Everything is facing outward. And I'm like, yes, because that is what a good systems and operations mind would do. Me, more leaning on the creative side, I'm there's spices in there. I have like 3 different paprikas because every time I need paprika, I go buy more at the store. That's actually, I have multiple paprikas, cinnamons, oreganos, many. I should have Caitlin come over and help me. But I was not specific about the traits that this person would have. And I also did not create tests either before we brought her on the team or just within that first 90 days probationary period to ensure that she actually did have these traits.
Yeah, and we'll link to the episode that we did about kind of this process, the pre-hiring process, because we dig into, based on lessons learned from this, what our new system is, which is very, very different and has been so far for us just really, really helpful in making sure that we can see how someone's mind works and is it going to be the right fit for what we need in the role. Because I think even, you know, something as broad as operations, that yes, are there people, unicorns, that could go to any company and fit in and do wonderful things? Yes, I do think there are people like that. But I think for specifically what we need. Our company, I feel like, had such specific needs that someone maybe from an operations background, but from a very different experience, might not come into a digital online business, and know kind of what was needed and how it could, they could streamline what we were doing. And so, and I think the other thing to this too, is I think about it, was the fact that our team is all remote. And I think there are just some people that don't operate well in a remote environment. That's neither a bad or good thing. There's no judgment placed on that. I just think there are some people that for their work style, they need the motivation of an office to be around in an environment that is conducive to work versus, some people who I think are in a home-based environment I'm very easily distracted too by laundry or cooking, and I can do this and I can do that. Yes. But I think there's, over the years, it fits my personality. I get my work done, and yes. Do I do laundry during lunch? Sure. But I think there are the folks that are just like, ooh, but the TV's there, and now I'm watching Netflix for 5 hours a day instead of getting my work done.
Yeah. So the lesson I learned was to make sure that I truly understood what I wanted from this person and what the traits this person should have, and that I made sure to ensure that this person had the traits before I brought them onto the team. Ideally, before you start them with their 90-day probation, but 100% within their 90-day probation. Because I will tell you, I did not bother to do any of this stuff. We brought her on staff. She was an employee. And then when I finally went, this is not working, then I had to go through the process of letting her go, which was, and I gave her plenty of notice, and we were very fair, but it was just you never want to have to let anyone go, it's just not it's not pleasant. So the sooner you can identify who is right for a role and who is not right for a role, the better.
And transparently, before we started recording, we were talking about the idea of when you hire someone, especially, we're all adults, you're hiring a professional to fill a role. And especially at that level that Nicki was hiring for at the time for that role, there was an expectation of, you're going to come in here and you have the autonomy to do this job, and here's what we need. And so having something in place where, of course, you don't want to micromanage someone by any means, and you shouldn't have to. They're a professional. They should be able to do their job. But to some extent, particularly during that 90-day period, having some system in place to kind of check in and make sure that the work that you need and want to get done is getting done. Because I think, especially in our company, we move very, very quickly. And so it's very, very easy to kind of be working on our individual things, and then suddenly you look up and you're like, oh, wait, this thing that I hired them to do and we talked about 3 months ago hasn't been implemented yet. What happened? What's the disconnect? So really walking that line, especially at the beginning, of making sure there's enough oversight, if you will, or enough direction, and that you're kind of checking in on that to say, yep, this is all good. And if it's not, being able to then step in and course correct, or kind of come to that realization that maybe they're not the best fit for the role.
Yeah. Well, and as we're talking about it, another thing that I learned, that, you as the boss of the company, you're only going to get one perspective on someone. And I'm not even necessarily saying that they're showing you the best of themselves, but they're being different to everybody else. That's not even what I'm saying. But I'm saying that you only see some of the work that they're doing, right? Because you shouldn't, like we were just saying, you shouldn't see all of it. But so then, especially during that 90-day probation period, I don't even like the idea of calling it probation period. It's kind of like 90-day, let's make sure everything fits period. We think it's going to fit, but let's make absolutely sure it's going to fit. 90 days of that. Check in with your team and say, hey, how are things going with are things going with so-and-so? What do you like about working with them? Are there any places that you are looking for some improvement? Or is there anything that has not gone smoothly? You don't have to say, what don't you like about them? But are there any things that aren't going as smoothly as you'd hope? Or do you see any opportunities to improve the way that you work together? Anything along those lines. And again, it's not because you're looking for your team members to be narking on each other by any means, but your team members may not feel empowered to say something. Yeah. And I know that was definitely a fault on my part that I didn't ask you, Kate, because I knew that, we know now that you were seeing some issues with this team member, and you quite rightly didn't want to necessarily call them out, because also too, you weren't sure if these were issues that everybody else was seeing. Maybe it was just a couple of interactions. But if I had come to you and said, hey, let's chat about, let's have our normal one-on-one, but also just want to do a check-in on how you're feeling that so-and-so is melding with the team, and what have your interactions been, all the questions that I just listed. Had I done that, I would have known a lot sooner that the stuff that I assumed was going smoothly was not actually going smoothly. And this team member, who was maybe starting to annoy me just a little bit, was actually making your working life more difficult.
Yeah. And from my memory of it, I think that's 100% valid. And I think that the timeline issue is really the crux, because I know for me, I sat on this for a very long time before I came to you. And I was like, how do I go about this in a way that doesn't feel like I'm throwing someone under the bus, but I really like, from my own sanity and working environment, need to raise this point with Nicki, because otherwise I'm going to go down a path that's not good and going to be very, very unhappy. And obviously you don't want to get to the point where your people are thinking of leaving their jobs because of something that is fixable, that is potentially, solvable. And so I do remember, and I don't remember how I raised it for you. I feel like it was very talking around the bush, and there was this sense of relief for both of us, where I feel like I remember there's just this like, okay, yes, I've been thinking this too. And it was like we were both in our own worlds of like, okay, maybe it's just us. Maybe we're not seeing the full thing, and then coming together and be like, oh, okay, this is an issue, and you're seeing this, and I'm seeing this, and here's how it's manifesting. And so I think that timeline could have, been bumped up had we had that conversation sooner. And I think I feel very lucky that you and I had a working relationship where I felt like I could go about this in a way that, I didn't want to look like the employee that's being a jerk. But we were, I think, very fortunate that, I don't know, had I been in another position like this, with working with someone who I didn't have as close of a relationship as with you, I don't know that I would have brought that up. And I think I would have sat on that even longer. And again, like I said, I think been very, very unhappy, and then potentially looking elsewhere to say, okay, how can I continue to be in this environment? And so I think I think it's challenging, but I think it's necessary to have those hard conversations with your employees, so you get a pulse of what's going on, and don't have to face, the surprise of suddenly you have a mass exodus of people, or whatever it is, or someone that you really, really value in the company, that you're like, oh, wait, what? Why this is a problem, and it's been a problem for years? Oh my gosh, because people are they might wait that long, and then it does come as a surprise, and you're blindsided.
Yeah. And like you said, thankfully we do have a very good and open relationship, but ultimately it should have never been on you to make the decision of whether or not to bring it up. It should have been on me, but it should have been, if we'd built it in as part of the process, then it wouldn't have even been an issue, and you wouldn't have had to wrestle with it, and we would have known so much earlier. Yeah.
And so very similar to this, as we were hiring for a while, we were looking to hire a marketing assistant. That's what we were calling the role. We felt like we needed additional support in this area. And so we hired twice for this role, quite frankly. And both times it was not a good fit. But it, again, timeline wise, it took us a while to get there with both of them. And I think what we realized, though, it wasn't the person that we hired per se, though there were, challenges there. The bigger issue that we noticed is that we were trying to fit all of these different things that we needed under the umbrella of marketing assistant. And really what we realized what we needed was we needed someone who could do copywriting. We needed someone who could do a little design. We needed someone who had a marketing mind, though, through all of this. We needed someone who could help out with basic operations things as well, of implementing emails into our email software, or working in our lead pages software to input copy or do a little bit of design work there. And so it became very clear, though, with the level of work, and to some extent, these folks were doing the best that they could with all of these tasks. But inevitably, they weren't copywriters, they weren't designers, they weren't, there was a learning curve to the tech, which certainly, yes, they could learn and get up to speed with. One of the bigger things too, no attention to detail on a lot of things. And so there was not a respect, if you will, for following processes. But it was all of these different roles. And what we really needed were experts in each of these things. We needed, 5 hours of copywriting support and 10 hours of design support. And then someone who had a mind for social media and all of these things that we're trying to fit into one role. Mm-hmm. And it was just setting up whoever was in that role. Could we have found a unicorn? Yes, absolutely. But it was so much smarter when we took a step back and said, you know what, we are trying to do too much with this role. We don't actually need this role, and we need actually probably fewer hours than a full-time role. Or even if we hit those full-time hours, but we're doing it with experts in what they do, we're going to save so much time. Particularly my time, I didn't have to review things. I didn't have to provide as much feedback. And again, for where we're at as a company, we're moving so quickly that we don't have that time, or don't want to necessarily use that time to be taking a junior kind of marketing assistant role and growing them to the place that where we needed them in this moment. Mm-hmm. And so I think we were looking longer term than we maybe should have in terms of hiring for that role, versus looking in the short term. What do we need right now and for the next, year, if you will, and then we can reevaluate it in a year and say, okay, do we need a marketing assistant now? Is this now the time for this role where we have the time and space to really help someone grow and give that feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were kind of trying to find a Swiss Army knife of a human, and then also find them at that maybe not fresh out of school, but a couple of years experience. And to your point, I'm sure there are people like that out there, but so much harder to try to find those people than to just look for the people who are experts in all of these various areas. And now and as the business has gotten bigger, it's not just, a couple hours for copywriting and a couple hours for design. Mm-hmm. There lots of work to do. But in kind of along those lines, we also had in our head, we want an employee because we want someone who can grow as Kate grows, but that also I certainly was leading the charge and being kind of very rigid about it has to be employee, and then it has to be the marketing assistant underneath Kate, and that just wasn't the best option. And on top of that too, this idea that it had to be an employee was also a mistake. I hear some business owners say, "Oh no, you have to have on-staff employees because freelancers are never as dedicated." And I think we talked about this in another episode, perhaps. But as people who have done a lot of freelancing, you can absolutely find dedicated and dedicated by who care about your company, who are passionate about the mission, who want to help your customers and clients, and who want your company to succeed. And, we have a team of, right now we have 3 employees and 11 freelancers. Yeah. And I know for a fact that every single one of these freelancers, first of all, they are members of our team. Mm-hmm. We don't think in terms of, they're an employee and they're a freelancer, and that, they're at the company meetings, we at our company all hands meetings, our yearly, they are members of our team. But I also know for a fact that these people care about the company, care about all of our students across all of our brands, care about us all being successful, care about each other. So it's so incorrect, this idea that freelancers cannot be dedicated to your company and freelancers can't help your company grow. It is incorrect. And if you try to do this without freelancers, I have to have employees, you are going to be limiting yourself from a whole pool of really, really fantastic people. So what we ended up doing, like you said, Kate, was we took this role and went, okay, what do we actually need? All right, what we need to solve right now is we need a designer. Okay, what do we need to solve right now? We need a social media. What do we need to solve right now? And because of that, we have brought on more people, but also more experts, and who bring so much more to the table because there are more of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in that process, Megan, our designer, who's incredible, amazing, we've noticed her other skill sets, and she is the type of person I think that can learn something and grow in it. And so we've been able to give her additional projects that maybe are outside the design sphere. And so I think that's a smarter way to go about it versus kind of what we were talking about earlier of hiring the person, not the role. Hire for the role, and then you can always experiment and see, okay, do they have other zones of genius beyond what I specifically hired them for? Some people might and some people might not, but at least then you know, and you've got the person you need for the specific thing that you hired them for, and then bonus if they can do additional things with your company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, on to number 3. I think we've gotten to 3.
Yes.
This one is, I think it's very common among business owners, and it kind of hit me hard. This is relying on agencies completely, or I should say, relying on agencies with full faith and trust that they are going to be focused on your business, and they are going to look at your numbers as much as you do, and they are going to care as much about your business as you do. And as I'm saying this out loud, it sounds dumb, right? But I think that that's how a lot of us go, I can't do this myself anymore. Or maybe some of us say, I can't do this at all. I'm going to give it to an agency. And we think, all right, well, because that agency is an expert, they're going to look at our goals. They're going to look at what we want to have happen. They're going to look at our assets. They're going to look at our numbers, and they're going to know the right thing to do. And that is not always the case. When you, and I'm not at all saying don't hire agencies, but you need to partner with them very carefully. I think the mistake that a lot of people make, and that I certainly have made, is that I go, okay, the agency is in charge of this now. I only maybe need to check in every once in a while, but they're going to do it. They're going to do it best, and they know what to do. And that's just not always the case. You can get advice from agencies, certainly, but you know your business best. And you hopefully, if you've done a lot of market research and our CSS students know, but you should know your target audience best. You should also, before you even think about hiring an agency, make sure you know your messaging best. Know what this target audience, again, CSS students, they know how important messaging is, and they know exactly how to dive into what that messaging needs to be. But you need to know how to talk to them best. You need to be the expert in your business and in your audience, so that when your agency comes to you and with ideas, or you can say, yep, absolutely, let's test that out. That might work for our audience. Or they might say, they might have an idea and you go, no, that's not an angle that they are concerned with. So I don't think that's going to perform well. Or we can test it, but test it on a very limited basis. Or, hey, we want to expand to this audience. You can say, no, that is not our audience at all. I don't want to put money to that. Whereas, an agency may be thinking in terms of, right, let's the greatest reach and all of these kinds of things. You have to partner, if not sometimes even guide an agency. You can't just be hands off, because what's going to happen is at the end of the month, and I've done this with a couple of different agencies that we work with. So mea culpa, I've made this mistake. Yay, I've made this mistake multiple times. So fun to admit that to the public. But you guys get it. That I've gone, all right, they know what they're doing, so okay. And then I check in at the end of the month and go, oh, those are not great. And maybe even I'll send numbers back and go, hey, these are what the numbers are. Thinking to myself, they see the numbers aren't good. They're gonna figure it out and they're gonna fix it. But they may not. First of all, they may not be as focused on your numbers as you are. You may see like, actually, my cost to acquire the sales, getting really close to what I actually charge for it, there's almost no profit in there. They're going to do something about this. They're going to fix this. They may not be making that connection. They may be just be going, all right, well, we're getting leads in the door for them. This is great. This is fantastic. They may just not be as focused on your numbers and on the ramifications. And also, too, they're not going to be able to do things as quickly as you want them to. And I'm not even necessarily saying that this is an argument for bringing something back in-house, but that's something you also need to be aware of. If you're going, whoa, we need to change this up fast, there's a good chance that your agency, because they have many other clients, your agency is not going to be able to do something fast. That's just part of what working with an agency.
Yeah, they might have a really big lead time for when they need to know this information to get it produced. If they're producing the creative and copy and whatnot as well. But I think the other thing, and you mentioned numbers, and I think the other thing to know is knowing your metrics that you want to measure and that you care about. Because I know Nicki mentioned reach, and so that's a great example. If your agency is very focused on, okay, this is our strategy, we're going to focus on just getting the most number of eyeballs on this ad possible, versus you're like, well, I don't really care about the most number of eyeballs. I want the right eyeballs, and I want people clicking through, and I want to get the right audience in front, that my ad in front of the right audience. And so I think having a deep understanding of what metrics you actually care about and being able to communicate that to your agency to say, hey, this is my focus, or, communicating those expectations with them up front when you start a relationship with them, to say, hey, here's kind of my expectations. How do they operate? Does that relationship align? Do you need to find a different agency that maybe works better with what you need? And so, I think yes, leaning to them, to look to them and saying, okay, what's your strategy? What are you thinking? What's the mix? What audiences are we going to target? What creative, all of that sort of thing. But being able to take a look at it and really question whether that strategy aligns with what you're hiring them for. And if not, can they adjust it? And I think thinking of hiring too, I think it's worth keeping that in mind of this isn't going to be a hands off. If you're hiring them to take work off your plate, absolutely. But knowing that you might still have a little bit of work on your plate, whether you hire an agency or whether you hire someone in-house, because there's going to be that guidance of making sure it is the right strategy and they're looking at the right numbers and that they're looking, creating the right creative and messaging. And so the workload might not be as hands off as anticipated. So it's
Yeah, and it shouldn't be that hands off. It should,
right.
And I know that especially for business, it can be very tempting to go, I don't want to learn how to do this. I'm just going to hire an agency to do it. But you can't be sure that agency is going to do it right. You need to at least have some kind of understanding, and you need to be checking in with that agency. It's if you don't understand how to do it and you spend money giving it to somebody else, there's no guarantee that they're gonna hit a home run. Or also too, team members and agencies change. If you're like, all right, YouTube ads, we haven't figured out YouTube ads. We don't have time to do it. Let's just hire an agency to do it. Okay, great. Maybe their YouTube ads, maybe they do a great job for a couple of months, and then somebody on their team changes, or somebody leaves, or somebody gets promoted, or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're seeing different results, and because it could be that the way that their team is structured, they have a different person working on it now. You cannot just blindly trust that your agency is going to be doing the best work for your business. And I'm not saying that an agency would ever deliberately not do great work, but they're never going to be as focused on your business as you are. So you have to be the advocate for your business and for your needs, even with agencies that you are paying.
Yeah. And they might be using tactics and wanting to test tactics that work for a completely different industry, for example, or a different type of business. And so that might be something, where you're like, okay, yeah, we can test this, but are we sure that's going to work for my specific offer? And I think that's just something to keep in mind too, with yes, they'll have a great idea of all the sorts of strategies that they can try, but knowing that they might be working with very, very different types of businesses, and those strategies might work really well for them and not really well for yours. And so everything is so unique to the specific business, and there's so many elements and layers. And so keeping on top of all of that is, certainly I wish, because I do feel like there's something to an agency like that cash of an agency to be like, you know, they're experts. They do this for these big brand, and like, of course, they're going to know exactly and all the right things. That if it almost feels like it's a magic button for you know whatever the thing is that they're going to, and suddenly results will follow. But that's not how it works. It's how they're good at marketing themselves, though. Certainly,
so good. Yeah, it's funny actually. When I used to work at a in-house as a copywriter, so like, I don't know, 18 years ago, it was a big multi-billion-dollar retailer, and we had a creative team in-house, and I was on the creative team, and then they would have an external agency do the ads, the commercials. And I just remember like they thought the agency like walked on water. They thought the agency was amazing. And we'd be getting stuff back. We're like, because we would have to work with what the agency sent us, and we'd be going, how are we supposed to do anything with this? And also this line doesn't make any sense. And like this is not on brand, but it's, and as much as back then we're like, oh, silly company, you think the agency and here I am sitting here telling you that I have been the silly company. I was like, yeah, no, the agency can just do it.
Well, yeah, and it reminds me of when I worked in an agency, and it just we had very big clients. You know, they had big budgets, is all that's to say. But it always amazed me that it just felt like, well, here's the portion of our marketing budget to do X project. There was never, at least on my end, maybe there was on the client end, but from the agency end, we're not monitoring the success of what we provided them, which is wild to me. And I don't even know if that company for certain projects, it was just like, well, no, we allocated, $30,000, we allocated 100, whatever it was for this thing. And you delivered this thing and yay, everyone's happy. I think it's very different when you are looking at your metrics and don't have, $30,000 to say, yep, that was a brand awareness play. And, how we're measuring that, we don't actually care.
Mm-hmm. And
wild.
Perfect segue into I think our last point.
Yes.
But I used to look at our numbers on a monthly basis. We make sales every day, and really across our bands, it tends to be pretty consistent. You dial up the ad spend a little bit, and the purchases go up a little bit, but it's a wonderful consistency. And so I used to look at our numbers on a monthly basis. And there was one month when I was talking to our agency, and they said, oh, your cost per lead is amazing. Really, it was something that was like $4 or something like that. I was like, oh, awesome. Scale it up. Keep going. It's when we put in more money, we get more money. Just scale it up. Keep going. Wow. And this was a good couple of years ago, but wow, I got to the end of the month and realized that we had a solid $40,000 that we overspent on, that we did not make sales on. That it would the difference between previous months and months going forward was $40,000, and I did not have any sales that I could attribute to that money. I basically, by saying absolutely scale it up and then not checking in on the results, like you were saying, not checking the results, I took 40 grand of our money and I lit it on fire. So that was a painful lesson to learn, because 40 grand is not chump change at any point, but especially as our business was really growing a couple of years ago, 40 grand was painful. But the lesson I learned was that I go in and I check our numbers each week. And Caitlin, our operations manager, tends to go in and we'll do kind of a litmus test on a daily basis, just pop in and see if anything looks off in case there's, something wrong with ads or landing pages or that kind of thing. But I check our numbers on a weekly basis. And if I had done that at the time, after about a week, maybe even a couple of weeks, I would have said, ooh, we're scaling this up and I'm not seeing the ads that we should be seeing with this ad spend. So let's take this back down. Or I might have dug in and said, okay, we're scaling up, but where are we scaling up? Because we might be scaling up the wrong campaigns or to the wrong audience.
That cost per lead might have been great, but it might have been just the wrong audience. So
Exactly. If you are sending if you're sending a really compelling message to the wrong audience, they may be opting in anyway, just because they're curious. And you certainly can't blame them. There are times that I opt in for stuff and I'm like, I know I'm not the target audience, but I want to know what they're talking about here. And maybe there's something I can use. And that can very easily happen on just about any brand. So a cost per lead is not the only thing. You're like, well, they're getting me a $3 cost per lead. This would be great. Yeah, but if the $3 cost per lead is to an audience that you know is not a purchasing audience, it doesn't matter. It's not just, it's there. You have to be looking at all of your metrics and you have to be looking at them regularly. Yeah. So I've made some mistakes and
I got to witness them. So
you did.
I played a part. I shouldn't, expunge myself from
No. However, I am the business owner and you are a member of our executive team. And for that, I am eternally grateful, but it will always ultimately come back to me. And for that reason, I am
They're your mistakes then. Take them, own them.
My mistakes. And that is why I am publicly sharing, and I will absolutely continue to make mistakes. There will be, we do this episode again in a couple of years, I'll have a whole other slew of things. But the important thing is that we not just make these mistakes, and hopefully with listening to this episode, I may help you to avoid some of these mistakes, at least partially avoid some of these mistakes. But all of the mistakes that I've made and that we all make as business owners are opportunities to course correct and to make sure that we don't do this in the future, or make sure that we don't do it on a larger scale. I mean, yes, did it hurt to lose 40 grand that month? Absolutely. But it would hurt a whole lot more to lose 400 grand, but which I would like to think that I would catch it before then. But that changing to monitoring our numbers each week. And again, it's not a huge change, but changing to monitoring our numbers every week has helped me head off some of the directions that we shouldn't have been going and course correct in the middle of the month instead of at the end of the month. So learning the little lessons, and sometimes they don't feel like little lessons when you have to let a team member go. It doesn't feel like a little lesson, and it is a big deal. But learning a lesson once, and maybe sometimes a little lesson can help prevent bigger problems or more systemic problems. So we learn them now, and then we move on, and then we make more mistakes and we learn from our next ones. But that is sigh, part of being a human. I remain painfully, fully flawed human. But anyway, hopefully this will help you. If you have experienced something similar, or if this has helped you, let us know. We always like to hear what your experiences are like, and if we can help you, then certainly let us know that as well. And with that, we will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do you want to learn how to sell and scale your offer on autopilot every single day without the chaos of live launching or the low conversions of Evergreen? Who doesn't, right? Get our free on-demand video training at circuitsalessystem.com/free. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel to make sure you never miss a video. We'll catch you next time.